Order, it's 3:01. And first order of business is to approve the minutes of, well, we have 3 outstanding sets of minutes that Cynthia has forwarded the October 7th draft. So thank you, Cynthia, very much. And I hope everyone's had a chance to look at them. I do have a couple of minor edits in under discussion of the following topics. Item number 1, I think the word "of" after discussion could be eliminated. The topics, the paragraphs under discussion of the following topics are numbered 1, 2, and 4.
I'll
So
fix that. Yeah.
I think that's just a sequencing thing.
Yeah.
Under then item 4, discussion, the second paragraph, last sentence, it was agreed that the committee would present, the word "to" could be deleted. It was agreed that the committee would present the pros and cons of the Standing Capital Committee. And then under next steps, item B, the Finance Committee meeting I attended was October 8th. Are there other edits to these minutes?
Elise, just let me ask, my internet connection went sideways for a minute. I lost you after paragraphs 1, 2, and 4, which I will correct in between the Finance Committee meeting. I think you said something else.
I just wanted to delete the word "to" in the last sentence of the second paragraph that begins, Ms. Ackerman suggested.
So I'll pull that up and make those edits.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
And then will you post them after with a note about our vote that we're about to take?
I will.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of October 7th as amended?
So moved.
Yep, Carl moves. And is there a second? Okay, I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone
Yes.
opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's unanimous. And thank you very much. So we'll look to review the next sets of meetings as soon as they're available, possibly next week, December 9th. And once again, I failed to take a roll call at the start of the meeting, so I'd like to rewind the tape and do that now. So in no particular order, Cynthia Rainey.
Present.
Carrie Ackerman.
Present.
Laurie Hunter.
She'll be here in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jared Stanton.
Present.
Carrie LaFleur.
Here.
Carl Packard.
Present.
Stephen Crane.
Present.
Elise Woodward. Present. And Parashar Patel. Not present at the moment. Great. All right. Thank you. And trying hard to get it right, I did not get it correct on this agenda where we have future meeting dates noted as December 16th, January 6th, and January 20th at 3 p.m. That is correct. We also have a future meeting date posted on December 9th at 6:45, which will be our setup time for the public forum. And the agenda incorrectly says that the public forum is tonight, December 2nd, but in fact, it will be next Wednesday, December 9th. And that meeting has been posted, I believe. I've been away, and maybe you all have more up-to-date information than I do. I did receive a couple of slides from Parashar, and Stephen, I think he sent them to you. Terry, I think you sent some edits to Stephen, maybe to other people as well. So if everyone agrees, I think it would be useful to go through the PowerPoint, which frames the conversation we hope to have at the public forum next week, and decide if we have more refinements to make to that, or maybe we have slides to delete to make it even more succinct. Stephen, is it possible for you to share your screen? Thank you.
Yes, I don't know that I incorporated Parshar's edits. That was a
Okay.
while ago. I
Well-
thought I did, but let me just go through what I have.
I have his slides on my desktop. I could share those. We could look at them. Why don't we go through what you have, and perhaps he will join us.
Okay, so I changed the date to
Thank you.
today. And then we have
Oops,
the.
wait a minute. Back up. I just saw December 2nd. I just saw that. We have to change that to the 9th.
Well, this is the update for today's meeting. So December 2nd is correct for this update, I think.
Okay.
But
Oh,
when
okay.
it is the final for the,
Oh, okay.
then you're
Sorry.
absolutely right. It will need to be the 9th.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's good.
I'll just do this in slideshow mode here.
Okay, thanks.
So the list of the members, we do still have that opening.
Yeah.
And then background, we've gone through this.
Yeah.
More background, gone through this. This is the work we've completed to date.
Mhm.
Then we get into CCHS capital plan process and timeline. So they go through their steps in the process. I don't know if you want Jared to go through this, or just it's sufficient just to show it.
Well, I think probably we should insert a slide before this
Yeah.
that shows the agenda for the public forum. So we have an opportunity to say, so this is the public forum, and this is what we're going to tell you. This is what we're going to present.
And I will probably use some transition slides.
Yeah.
I just didn't bother with that because this all needs to be formatted.
Right.
and,
Okay.
No,
That's fine. Fair enough.
and prettied up. So the CCHS. Let's do that as we go through here. There's their process. They have a needs assessment process that they lay out. I'll be honest, we don't have as detailed a process right now for the town. We do have our needs assessment that we've talked about that we need to finish up with TBA Architects, which
Mhm.
is a comprehensive document that then I think we could build off. We could build a new assessment off of that, but I also think we need to do an assessment of non-building infrastructure. I know we're talking predominantly about general fund projects, but I think it's helpful to look at, water, sewer, light plant, like all the big ticket items, even though those are enterprise funds, they're still capital items. And I know the town meeting wouldn't necessarily vote on funding for those, but it's still helpful organizationally to have that. And then, this is like this because I had a problem. I could not adjust the margins on this thing.
That's
so,
okay.
So then we had to talk about land purchases. So I think one of the things we've done a little bit of, but not much, is kind of look around at parcels and buildings that could be suitable for municipal use. Once we've kind of identified needs that aren't being met by our current facilities, are there parcels or buildings that could better meet those needs, and kind of identify those. I think to some extent, we would be pretty discreet about how we do that because you don't want to create an impression that the town is going to take imminent action against, an eminent domain taking or something like that against a property that's been talked about publicly, unless you're really serious about moving forward with it.
Yeah.
Um,
So, Stephen, it seems to me that the items on that slide that we're looking at now, the 3 items from the town needs assessment slide, are process items that happen on top of the 5-year capital improvement program. So and I don't know if Carrie, I'd like your input on this, but if we created a slide that that essentially had bullets from John Harris's memo that would sort of describe the 5-year capital improvement program, that seems to me that is a parallel process to the CPS, CCHS planning. And then the needs assessment, which your 3 bullets address, are what happens for larger projects. The 5-year capital plan, just like the CPS strategy, those are primarily tier 1 and tier 2 projects, if I understand that correctly.
This part is, and so I did that out of
Yep.
order. So
Okay.
this is the town's planning process, which is basically culled from John's memo.
Great, okay.
It's a little less, it's laid out a little differently than the schools, but it has generally the dates and stuff like that. And sometimes this does sometimes happen for tier 3 projects, but usually if something, and then the problem we have is we're trying to find an example of a non-school tier 3 project that is in recent enough history that we could, forensically assign, break the process that happened on that project down into this outline. But I'm not aware of one because I'm kind of new.
Would the townhouse renovation fall into that?
No,
Not big enough, right?
not big enough. That's about $500,000.
What about the bus depot?
Yeah, we did talk about, we did identify that as probably the only thing that we could come up with. And Cynthia, honestly, that happened before me, so we didn't, I wasn't able to talk to Stephen about the process. We certainly could go back and look at the process, but I was wondering if it was more of an opportunistic type project that didn't really follow what would be a standard process anyway.
No, it was,
Oh.
no, I'm saying, yes, you are correct, because it was, a constant search for the space, and the stars kind of aligned
Yeah.
with the W.R. Graceland.
Kind of.
Well,
Yeah.
but I do think that might be a decent example, because that what is an example of a big project that served multiple purposes. So for the investment in that property, it did, we gained a lot in different arenas.
So let me can we come back to this, please?
Okay, sure.
Because I think I think we could spend a little bit of time trying to find sample projects in advance of the forum, but I don't know that we'll come up with any.
Can
but
I? Yeah, I'm going to ask we're careful about how much we bring up the bus depot, because it's got some pretty challenging history here. It'll distract us.
I think you'd get a lot of pushback on it.
Yeah,
It's not a good example, really.
Not a good example.
I agree. I think it's a big distraction. It's not what we don't recommend following the process that we use for that.
That's how not to do it, right? Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I could debate that. I don't necessarily agree with those statements, but let's move on.
Okay, so with, like I said, I think the needs assessment that we have for town projects, we don't have as specific a list as the schools, because, well, we just don't. I think we will, once TBA finishes their work, we'll have that'll be our foundation for that, but this is a placeholder, really, and we'll just have to say that as part of this process, we look to build out our needs assessments, our ongoing needs assessments. So this is the 3 tiers, the proposed system.
Can I just say, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I can hear everyone really clearly except you, Stephen. I don't know if I'm the only one with a problem.
Terry, I'm sorry, who can you not hear?
Stephen, is everybody else okay hearing him? Am I
Mhm.
the only one? I can hear everybody else fine.
I hear him clearly.
Okay, it's just that the volume is a little too soft or something, I don't know. Also, there's a slide, if you could just back a couple of slides, the school detail slide. The one with all the projects on it of the schools.
Oh, the needs assessment. Yeah, this one.
I'm just wondering if this slide is a distraction because it has a lot of detail and a lot of it has to do with tiers 1 and 2. And I just don't know how much detail we want to go into about tiers 1 and 2.
So I think we discussed this last a couple weeks ago, and we thought that we might not show this slide, but we might use a couple of the items on this slide as examples of the kinds of projects that the school district assesses annually.
Okay.
But you're right. So we know a lot about the process for tier 1 and tier 2 projects. And so what we really, I think, need to do is kind of streamline any presentation we make about that and focus on how we could, how we deal with large projects, whether they come out of the needs assessment or whether they come out of assessing all the town facilities to determine future needs assessments.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess my view of it is we're gonna have a slide for the school's needs assessment process. And so whether it has 3 things or all of these things on it, you're gonna have a slide. And I think you're still gonna spend, 3 seconds describe, you're not gonna go through each item when we present,
Right.
or we wouldn't go through each item we present. We would just say, here's a list of things we assess annually.
Exactly. And since Jared and Laurie have already prepared this slide, I think we should probably just use it and say, these are examples of the tier 1 and tier 2 projects that we typically see for the school district.
Okay, so back down here. So then we have the proposed system for capital planning. I think we did this background. There were a couple of repeat slides in here.
Yep.
Let me go back and make sure I've got this one. Yeah. I don't know how this got so gummed up.
Well, it may have been dropped in as a transition slide.
It's a bit of a Frankenstein presentation at this point. So then the definition of very large project. And then we talk about phased projects. And then evaluation criteria. Oh, sorry.
Oops.
And this had Kate Hanley's input
Right.
for sustainability. And then governance objectives for the governance structure, and then this is standing capital planning committee. And then we have.
So that slide, if you go back, no, the next one. Yeah. I don't know what value this slide adds. It has a lot of abstract thinking in it. It's got a lot of words on the slide for a person to try to absorb, and I'm really not sure what it's trying to say. And like if we just went to the next slide, I think this is supposed to lead into the next slide, but I'm not sure that we need this slide.
Probably don't.
Other than the objectives.
Right.
This part could be of some benefit. This section could be, because we're not really talking governance. This is really, we changed this to approval process.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So
Yeah,
we
just
can retitle it.
eliminate all that stuff and just put in the meat of it then. Yeah,
This can be a little bigger. So, yeah. Okay. And then we've got the project approval process that Terry reorganized. So we start with status quo, which makes sense.
Yep. So these are options,
Yeah.
right? So it's a capital project approval process options. Okay, so, yeah,
The status quo shouldn't be a bullet. That's the option, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
yeah, well,
Are you saying, Cynthia, are you saying this should not be a bullet?
Well, isn't
Right.
that the option?
right.
Well, the option is to maintain status quo.
Okay, it's just a little, it confuses me, so it's fine if it doesn't confuse anybody else.
No, I agree. I think we should put status quo like in bold or underlined or something. And the same with the next one, advisory standing committee, that would be underlined or bold or something. So that's the name of the option.
Right.
okay, well, that's a formatting thing. So,
Right.
we can do that offline, I think.
Okay.
But
We
do
wanna
we
go through the
agree
process.
that this chart format is useful?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that's good.
How much of this is going to be talking and how much is going to be just showing?
Well, to be determined, I think,
Okay.
but I think, in the presentation, we could, whoever is presenting this could show the slide with the three options and say, these are the three options that that we'll want to discuss tonight, and
Good,
then roll through them one at a time.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, all right.
So
So that's the advisory committee. That's that's number 2. Yeah. This is 3. Yep.
well, it really is, we could add a slide here. We could change this to 2. And we could add a slide to say, above this, to say, maintain status, option 1, maintain status quo. And then just maybe put a couple of bullets that says, tweaks to needs assessment and, department review or something like that.
Yeah. So department review, needs assessment, review annually, whatever that is. So I think that's good to have 3. Yeah. And I think it probably would be important to say where the decision-making authority is.
It must be painful watching me type. I apologize.
No, thank you for doing it.
Mhm. Okay, so then option 2, and then we'll change this to approval option 3. Okay. Any quick comments on the content of this slide?
So let's just go over this option 3 a bit, because this is one that our committee hasn't really discussed that much. Let's just see, it's the project-based review committees. What does that mean?
So a lot of big projects end up getting a committee formed just for that project. And so
Right,
that would really, and so that happens currently.
right,
You know, I don't want to use the middle school as an example of that, even though it is, because that's a kind of a modeling a state process, not a local one. But, you know, if there was, you know, we have advisory committees that get formed to advise on projects like Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Committee, and
Right.
things like that. So on a tier 3, would we expect to have project-based committees formed just for those projects? Probably so. So you would continue with those, you know,
But-
ad hoc project-based ones,
okay,
not have a
So-
standing committee.
right. The way I see this, though, is, I'm not sure if everybody sees it this way, but that the project-based review committee might not even be formed yet. It's still a concept that a standing committee or an enhanced option 3, we're still trying to decide, do we want this project in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Maybe we don't even have a project-based review committee. I guess I think after the project is sequenced, like, okay, we know it's coming in year 3. So now we're going to form the project review committee. I see that project review committee coming after it's sequenced by the capital plan process. That's just how I see it. I don't know if other people see it differently.
I agree. I mean, I just, there's a, I'm uncomfortable with a bunch of things here, but yeah, I mean, the project-based committees are formed. Well, I guess the middle school project, we still even haven't even had a, yeah, they've been formed for particular projects. And then I think this, whatever this process, approval or whatever it is, we're talking about a committee that would be dealing with the total capital planning process. So I don't see where, you know, these project-based committees are something that comes in after the fact, after the planning, the capital planning process.
Well, I think. Sorry, Carl.
No, you go ahead.
So I think so I'll give you an example of what I mean, what a project-based committee would look like for a tier 3 town project. So in the TBA architects draft report, we identified a new public safety complex as kind of our town side #1 priority.
We hit it out.
And so basically for something like that, if we knew it was going to require, if we knew it was going to be on the order of, you know, $15 million to build a public safety complex, and we knew we didn't have a town-owned parcel of land to put it, so we were going to have to acquire a piece of property, you're talking about a multi-year planning and you know, site selection process. So many times a committee of residents gets put together, a task force or a committee, to meet with the town, with town and staff, to go through options, site selection, hold public hearings, and then sometimes those committees continue through the designer selection process, and then the you know, Chapter 149 bidding process, the public construction bidding process, where they review the bids and stuff like that. And then sometimes they are a committee that stays together during the construction. So if there's a change order over a certain amount, they are authorized to review and approve those change orders. And then once you cut the ribbon, that committee gets disbanded. And so that happens most times, especially if there's a site selection involved. there's almost always a committee that gets formed.
Yeah, well, I mean, for the middle school, there was a committee that was formed several years ago. And that committee, sort of brought the thing forward, but that again was not a part of a general capital planning process. That's looking at overall capital expenditures for the town.
But we're only talking about tier 3, and because there aren't tier 3 projects every year, that's why a project-based committee would be appointed.
I think what Carl's saying is there will be a project-based committee, and it will do the site selection and all of that. But
Yeah, if you had like a permanent building committee, that
right,
could,
but he used, but Carl used the term after the fact. All of that stuff will happen after the capital planning process decides where this project is sequenced.
What that is part of the capital plan, the overall capital plan,
right.
large projects. I mean, I think part of the dissatisfaction with the current process has been that these projects, the large projects, each one has its own life outside of an overall look at the capital expenditures that's the town is taking over the long range. And on the finance committee, a couple of years ago, we became aware of the fact that there were several large projects that were on the horizon, but nobody was looking at what the tax impacts, among other things, of those projects were. They were just kind of floating along like ships out there. They weren't part of a fleet that was was going to come into harbor and we were going to have to deal with. And Carrie's still here, but we asked Carrie to take a look at what the impacts would be of the projects, the middle school, the town buildings, potential projects at that time. I think TBA was maybe just starting on their work, an eventual fire station for West Concord. I think there are a couple of other projects that were thought about, and we realized that cumulatively these projects would have a significant impact on taxes if they weren't planned for and spaced out properly. And I think that was kind of when we started saying, we should really have a capital plan. But meanwhile, certainly the middle school had a committee that was working on that for several years. Of course, we still haven't really had the come before town meeting yet.
So I think that's this is a very useful conversation. It seems to me that the enhanced modified process would be something like a needs assessment, and we could kind of say, well, that's going to be annually or every 5 years or every 25 years or whatever the cadence of that would be, and that from the needs assessment, possible future projects would be identified, and an estimate would be attached to the required expenditure for those projects, and it would have to be escalated, as we've discussed, and then the priorities and sequence of them would be assessed.
Right. And we could do that on a rolling basis. I mean, basically every year we would look at, and I think it should be at least a 10-year
Well, our charge is for a 10-year
window of time,
so-
but we would look at it every year. We'd come back we would look at it this year for 10 years in the future, we being this committee, whatever it is, would look at it 10 years in the future this year, come back next year. What are we looking at 10 years in the future next year? It's not going to be the same 10 years, So, but it would be looking at all these significant capital expenditures that the town will be dealing with.
But the project-based committee would
It's
be-
different.
Well, it would be established when one of these projects from the constellation of needs assessment came to be the time to do a feasibility study for it. That's when typically you would get
Yeah,
the project-based building
Yeah.
committee, review committee.
Right. So I just brought it up because I didn't see that that project-based review committee was necessarily part of this option 3. You're going to have a project-based review committee under option 1, option 2, and option 3, but it's
Right.
part of what we're trying to talk about right here, about what Carl and Elise, you guys just said, that there's a rolling, there's a group or a process where somehow we look at all the needs for the next 10 years before we even get to a project-based review committee.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll also just jump in with another thing that I have a little bit of difficulty with, and I just been letting things go by, but this that word approval.
Yeah.
We discussed this last time, and I think we're pretty clear on that approval comes from town meeting. When it gets to town meeting, the project isn't approved until it gets to town meeting. And a plan, just because something is on a plan, doesn't mean it's approved.
But the plan, we're talking about plan approval, not project approval.
Well,
But
why don't we just
what
put,
does that mean?
why don't we just put capital plan option 1, capital plan option?
Yeah, good.
Okay, sure.
I think, yeah, Terry's, that's, yep. Yeah,
And then I also think we should discuss, whoops. Wait till this is done.
So back to what differentiates option 3 from option 1 and 2? Because I agree, forming a committee once something's been picked out to start the feasibility, that's always going to happen with a tier 3 project,
good, yeah.
right? I guess.
Well, no,
Say
I
that
think,
again, Cynthia?
I said, forming, if it's part of the process and the sequencing and the prioritizing is deemed that X will become the next priority, then I would think then a feasibility committee would be formed to begin that process.
At some point during the life of the plan, yeah.
well, not necessarily. Not necessarily, because if you have a standing committee that is appointed for 3-year terms and they meet every year to review tier 3 projects, then that same committee is going to review the public safety complex, the next school project, the roof of whatever, of a new salt shed at CPW. That same group is going to review all of those.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
No, but that's what that option is. That's what that option says.
Which option?
Option 2. That's what option 2 means to me anyway. That's what option 2 means.
No, I'm talking
It
about
says-
option 3.
Option 3 then would be there wouldn't be a standing committee that meets every year to review tier 3 projects, all of them. It would be a committee would get formed to, kind of advise and oversee the development of a single tier 3 project.
And that's, I think, what,
No,
That's what option 3 represents?
no.
That's what's.
It's not a capital planning process.
I think that's the concern, that there's
Correct.
no, how do we get to that?
To which?
Because,
To
because
3,
the
how do we,
project-
how do we decide that a project is the next in line? As a town?
Well, if you're doing capital planning on an ongoing basis, I think, you know, there's a certain point along that you know, the project is going to be coming up, and it would be time to form a project committee, which would be separate from the capital planning.
But Elise is right in that that committee, that project-based committee gets formed very, very early on, even during the capital planning process. So it's not like, you know, a
Could
lot of
be.
times that happens very early on in the project gestation period. I think when to get to your question of when do the priorities get determined, that's why I put in the joint meeting of elected bodies. So the school committee or regional school committee and select board could have a joint meeting, look at the capital plans and say, these are what we think are the priorities for the community.
Well, so that should be the focus of this slide, because the project-based review committee happens in option 1, it happens in option 2, and it happens in option 3. And it doesn't only have to do with option 3.
But it doesn't have to happen in option 2 or option. It happens in option 1 by default. It wouldn't necessarily need to happen if we had a standing committee.
Sure it would. Option 2 would be a standing committee, right?
Yes, but no, I suppose you're right. There could be a project-based review. There could be a project-based review committee. It would come into the process later.
Right.
Yes, yep.
And I will tell you, was it Phil Swain who came and talked about a permanent building committee?
Yeah.
Yeah,
If we chose to do a permanent,
which is yeah, okay, go ahead.
if we did that instead of a capital planning advisory committee, if we did a permanent building committee, then the permanent building committee would be that project-based committee for every project.
Yeah, but you
Okay.
wouldn't do that
But
instead
that's a different discussion.
planning committee.
Yep.
That would be
That's not our charge.
position 2.
Right,
I
discussion.
was talking there.
But actually, I think you could do that, because if we're talking about tier 3 projects only, they're gonna fall into that level anyway.
Of being
Of-
having a building
yeah.
committee.
Yeah, of either needing
Yeah.
a building committee or needing a project committee.
Yeah, I think what Phil was talking about with a permanent building committee, which is a committee, in the case of towns that have a permanent building committee, I work for a few of them, those committees generally take care of, are like a project review committee for, all the town's capital project, be they schools, be they housing, whatever. But they're dealing with things like design review, they would take it through the bidding process to a certain extent. They would do, review bids, would monitor construction and so on. Obviously, the towns have a, individual, usually from the facilities department or something, that actually is the project, point person. But the permanent building committees in the towns that, where I've worked with them, they're project implementation focused.
Mhm.
But the idea of the capital planning thing was really a much broader view and, further a step back in looking at these projects and prioritizing these projects. And it really came about when we started looking at the projects that were kind of on the horizon. And, if they all hit within the next 3 years, our taxes would double.
Right. So So getting back to this slide, I think this is maybe the most important slide in the whole presentation. And I don't think that this committee has fleshed out our discussion of it enough yet. I think we need to move on, I get that, but here's the situation. We've got now 3 options: status quo, a standing committee, or this option 3 that I don't think we've really talked through. And just for example, I was a real strong proponent of option 2, a standing committee. But I'm thinking now that option 3 might be better, but I don't know, because I don't totally understand what option 3 is. Is there anybody in this group that can explain what option 3, how is it going to work? What is it?
So I don't know that I can explain it, but it seems to me that the benefit of option 3 primarily is that the entities that have responsibility today and authority for teeing up projects, for describing projects, assessing needs, teeing them up, still maintain that authority here, as opposed to inserting an advisory committee in the middle of that, which I think will may not prove to be effective for enhancing the decision making.
Right. So maybe we could just talk a little bit more about how these people, and this is why these people are actually on this committee: the town manager, the superintendent, select board, school committee. How are they going to prioritize and sequence these projects?
So I guess I know I've been kind of dominating the conversation here, but I'll just offer that a couple of things. Because we're talking tier 3 projects, the frequency of them, in my mind, does not really justify a standing committee, because they just aren't that frequent. The goal of option 3 is to really have, like I said, the primary elected bodies get together annually or on an as needed basis to kind of share their sides of the house priorities and see if they can merge them together. We, the superintendent and I, went through this exercise early on when I got here, and we did our own list that I presented to the board, but formalize it. So the elected officials are a part of that tier 3 prioritization process, because those are, as Carl noted, that's when the big bucks start, getting spent. So that's where that joint meeting is really the linchpin of this option. The project-based review committees part of this slide is really just to show Concord residents that there would still be residents who would be a part of these large project processes and provide some level of, I say the word oversight, but you know what I mean, provide that same kind of stewardship that I think some people would have an interest in, and transparency that some people would have an interest in on a standing committee. That role of transparency, watchdog, whatever you want to call it, would be played by this committee. You're not losing that role if you go with this option. That's really the point of that.
Well, I just think the project-based review committees should come up when at the point of a feasibility study, not at the point of describing, not at the point of needs assessment. You don't need a project-based committee. You don't need a building committee or review committee to weigh in on consolidating town services in a new facility, for example, until it's time to do a true feasibility study of that.
That's right.
It's one thing to say consolidated town administrative or facility building is on the horizon, and we think it will meet these needs, and it will help us save this money and that kind of thing. But you wouldn't really be, until you've got the project identified, you wouldn't need the you wouldn't need the project-based committee.
No, but you do need the capital planning committee.
Well, you need a capital planning process.
Process, okay, yeah.
See, I will argue that we don't need a capital planning committee. We
Okay.
need a capital planning process that
I
would.
think we're still at the point where, you know, where that question is an open question, and I think.
It is an open question, and we agreed we
Yeah.
would present pros and cons. So I'm,
Okay.
you know, I'm trying not to bias the conversation with my particular bias, but
Likewise,
I think that we need to be able to describe the capital planning process
Right.
clearly enough. And so
Right.
what we talked about in the fall was establishing a template, and that's how the criteria came out. In fact, I think the charge refers to a template.
Oh, yeah. Good.
So, which would be a set of predictable questions, conversations between the town staff, school staff, and, you know, the school committee and the select board, and possibly the finance committee, the appointed body, to review the priorities.
That's great. I agree with that. So I think the way this slide should look is it's after it says joint meeting of elected bodies.
Oh, so long. Sorry.
Joint meeting of elected bodies to sequence the priorities, or and then take out all the rest of this slide. Okay, that's fine, something like that. And then take out all the rest and put in something about the template, you know, that they're going to develop the template, or staff will develop the template, and then the elected bodies will review and sequence it.
What does the template look like? I'm not following that part of it.
It looks kind of like the 5-year plan that you've already done. It's got each project, each fiscal year. It shows which year each project comes up and an estimated cost. Sort of a one-page summary. So you've got like, you know, the salt shed, you know, the fire, public safety building. For each one, it just shows which year it comes up and what the estimated cost is.
The sequencing, or the year a project comes up, is, if this is a rolling process, that could change from year to
Right.
year.
So annually, there should be an annual joint meeting of the elected bodies to look at this and see, oh, has any priority changed since last year?
Yes, I agree with that.
And can you just reiterate what the elected bodies are?
It would be school committee and select board. I think there are probably times where the regional school committee would be a part of that as well. I think that would depend on the project. And I'll defer to Lori on when they would be a part, whether you'd need to have the regional or just CPS committee.
I think this is all CPS. Hard to say. Region gets trickier because they're their own body and Carlisle's involved. So
Right.
So it'd be select board and school committee then.
So I'm just, let's be clear that we don't foresee a $5 million or greater project right now on the school side. It's possible, I'm not saying, but I think that most of this planning will fall to the select board. I mean, the school committee can be there.
So Cynthia, I think it is,
or you can take that night off, though.
no, but I think it's important for it to be, I mean, part of the effort here is to kind of integrate the planning, the capital planning
Yeah,
across,
I agree.
you know, schools and towns. And so it's important that whether there is a town project or a school project, that the planning reviews priorities and sequences it. Because what we want to achieve with this additionally is more bang for our buck, basically.
Yep.
So better buildings, more cost effective, more energy saving, more cost effective, lower operating costs, all of that work to support both the towns and the school.
But they would, because I was thinking about this, we're gonna probably bond $100 million project, which is twice what we bonded for the high school. So there's gonna be, it's gonna be a little bit of a timeout, I would think. And that's why it's so important to think about the sequencing in terms of the financial impact to the town.
Right.
Right,
Yes, it is.
Exactly.
right.
I
And
don't-
that's why we all,
John was here before. I don't know. He didn't, he disappeared, but I mean, he was on the finance committee when we started looking at this, and it was really an eye opener when we looked at what the tax impact of, if these projects aren't sequenced out and spaced apart, that the tax impact would be really quite onerous.
Mhm.
good point. So I think we can add some more bullets, like something about input from the public and input from the finance committee. And something about sequencing includes smoothing the debt burden.
Exactly.
So maybe that first bullet should say review priorities, project timing, and sequencing debt.
Sequencing debt to smooth the debt.
Right.
Peaks and valleys.
Carl, is that good language for you or not?
Debt, yes. That's the key word.
Debt, okay.
And I think we need another bullet, to Stephen's point about, we need to tell the public that they're gonna have input. Of course, they're gonna have input. They have input into everything, but we could probably put another bullet about, input from the public and input. I think we need input from the finance committee.
So then let's just make a separate bullet that says public input
Right.
or finance
Right.
committee input.
Yeah, you don't have to,
Well,
Right.
I mean, I
that's given, but we,
well, I think,
given.
sorry,
Stephen,
Carl, we're
Stephen.
crossing over each other. Sorry, I guess because public input is built into all of these steps in every option,
Okay,
and finance committee, because ultimately it's going on a warrant,
Right.
and we have public hearings. I don't know, calling it out as separate bullets here, really, I don't think it's not needed here because it's in virtually everything. And we should say, at the top, don't forget that there are all these normal processes that all this
Right.
has to go through.
okay.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, but the finance committee was not seeing these projects or considering these projects until they were on the town meeting warrant.
Right,
And that's why we're here today.
I mean,
right. I
also-
think finance committee should be having input into this, even though they're not elected.
Well, I don't know that that's, I mean, typically the role of the finance committee would make it so then it's not a project prioritization or review. I do think in terms of collaboration, you could have the finance committee, have the finance co-chairs attend, the way we did it in Long Meadow. We didn't do it for capital, but we did it for the budget. Our budget process kicked off every fall with a joint select board school committee meeting, and the finance committee chair sat at the big kids table and was a part of, not the whole finance committee, but just the finance committee chair was there representing the committee and was a part of the dialogue and hearing the budget assumptions going forward. I think you could probably do that, but I don't want to extend a role that isn't really a natural part of what the finance committee would.
Yeah, the finance committee really in itself doesn't do capital planning.
No.
That's not part of the
Yeah.
Job
But-
description.
I mean, the finance committee, in what the finance committee in Concord does a very good job of this, asks the right questions to say, was the process that brought this thing to the warrant thoughtful, thorough? Are we getting our money's worth? Not, is this the right project?
No, but that question that you just framed there was the question that brought us up short.
Right.
And the other concern of the finance committee has been the debt sequencing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That part should be a part of that joint meeting presentation, because that's not that
Right.
difficult to produce, and the public certainly wants to know that, for sure.
Right.
So
Good.
I think we need a bullet that addresses climate impacts or sustainability or aligning projects with Concord's climate action plan, because our charge specifically asks us for that.
Well, this is where we were proposing specific project evaluation criteria.
And this should be part of the template. And so,
Sure, yes.
right, so that seems to me that we ought to be specific that the template includes that
You know,
criteria assessment.
Yeah, I mean, the template should be a part of status quo anyway.
No, wait a minute. We want to distinguish this option. The problem with the status quo is we don't have a template. So we want to distinguish option 1 from option 3.
And
So, yeah.
Should we be including in option 3, should we be looking at a 10-year horizon versus a 5-year horizon?
Yep.
I think that should be an issue for any of these, any of these should, what horizon? And I think, again, I think the longer the horizon, the better.
Right.
Okay.
That's my particular thing, but I think the horizon should be,
At least 10.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we did say that above, didn't we?
That's one of
Isn't that
those
charged?
things like,
Part of the
It's a part of the charge.
It should be a given.
Isn't that a part of the committee charge?
It is.
Yeah, 10-year capital plan, here it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
So I don't see the need to add it down here.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. It's already been stated as a given. Yep.
Okay. Ready to move forward?
Please.
We could hear that.
That's all right, we've
You're-
got
Yes, to say, you're not muted.
There's a little bit of love above the level that would have been, whatever, sort of voce.
So capital planning standing committee advantages, capital standing planning committee disadvantages. I think with the way the discussion about option 3 just unfolded, if we're not going to do these slides for options 1 and 3, I don't know that we should have these, or we should repackage these in a different way.
This thing about standing committee, and
Yeah.
the pros and cons.
I think that's kind of a separate,
Well, it seems to me
related
that
but separate question.
Well, it seems to me that there's 3 options: status quo, standing committee, and this enhanced new process. So if let's assume for a minute that we're not going to go with status quo, then it's either going to be the standing committee or this enhanced new process. So I think that these next 2 slides are saying, what are the relative advantages and disadvantages of versus option 3? Because those are the 2 main options that I think we're going to be considering. Maybe the title is wrong.
So I think we need to repackage these slides and have them. We may not want to present them, but we may want to be able to pull them up during the conversation and say, these are some of the advantages and disadvantages that we have discussed. Because it might be good fodder for the public to add to it or quibble with us about it.
You could make option 3, option 2, just flip flop those,
Mm-hmm,
then run through these slides and then make the recommendation.
mm-hmm. Yep, okay. How do people feel about that?
Well, from a presentation standpoint, that makes more sense anyway.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, that makes sense. So am I hiding these slides or are we keeping them in the presentation?
Well, we need to rework them. If we're going to show them, I think we need to rework them and, make them less verbose, but fewer words.
So there's two audiences. We have the public audience next week. But then we also have the select board is the final audience of this.
Right.
And is this maybe a subject area that is best saved for a presentation to the select board
Yeah.
based on
Wouldn't
information?
it be good to get some public input on the subject, and wouldn't that help the select board to,
Right.
I think at the issue of if somebody at the forum says, well, what are the pros and cons of having one? I think we've all been at this long enough to be able to articulate our own opinions
Right.
about pros and cons based on this. And then we may get, like Car, you're absolutely right, we may get feedback that helps us modify these slides, and then we go back and these slides end up in the final presentation to the select board as a part of our recommendation to the board.
I think that the people who will attend the public forum are some of the same people who have made these comments about either the advantages or the disadvantages. So I think we should have the slides ready to say, yes, we've definitely considered your ideas, and what other ideas do you have? I think it will come up. So it doesn't have to be in the regular presentation, but we should have them ready.
So Stephen, I don't think, let's just put them at the end, basically, after our, discussion slide. Let's hear from you.
If you want, I could try to reword them by abbreviating and, like where it says committee would be the mechanism for. We could take out that kind of stuff. I could try to make them less verbose if you want me to take a shot at it.
Again, I don't think I think we're gonna need to do that for the presentation to the board, but I don't know that we'll need that for next week because, like I said, I think,
right.
Well,
Okay.
I think these need. We have spent some time talking about this, but not tons.
Yeah. Well, these slides are catch-alls essentially for comments that have either things that we have discussed or comments that we have received.
Right.
And so, and so from that standpoint, they're just a list.
Right. And people at the forum may ask for a copy of the slides, and we're going to post it somewhere. So we have to decide whether those two slides will be part of the posting or not.
Probably not. We'll post what we present.
Right.
What was that?
We will post what we present, and if
Right.
we're not going to present them, then we won't post them.
Right.
Eventually it's all going to get presented and posted, but maybe not necessarily
Right.
for the public forum because it's not. We're trying to get information about advantages and disadvantages at this stage. So this is the draft task force recommendations. So let me go back to this.
Yeah. So we should also include define very large project or definition of very large project, because that's
isn't that in there?
in the charge as well, right?
Right.
So
See,
first bullet should be determine what constitutes a very large project.
Right.
Well, no, I think that the recommendation is our definition of very large project.
Yeah, correct. Okay.
I'm gonna make to put this in editorial quotes here so we know that
Yeah.
we'll actually vest it in the thing.
Okay.
Because this will end up being a couple of slides anyway.
Right.
And
What's
then,
It's between the second bullet and the last one.
huh?
What's the difference between the second bullet? Process for prioritizing and sequencing projects. What's the difference between that one and the last bullet?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, the last one identifies the projects, you know, but you're not really processing these projects or until you identify them. I keep on coming up I keep on coming up with this simile of or a metaphor of being whatever onshore or in a harbor, and there's these things floating around out there. So until you see them on the horizon, you've got to be projecting and looking for those things and seeing those things. Then you can do this other thing of prioritizing and sequencing. But if you don't see them, then they won't be part of the process.
Yeah, so the process for identifying is the needs assessment, right?
Generally speaking, yeah, I guess so, yeah. But
Now, this bullet that says integrate town and school tier 3 project list at a joint meeting. Are we recommending that? Or
That's now our renumbered option 2.
right? So I'm not sure. This is just an option. It's not a recommendation yet. Is that right?
Well, what we said was we were going to present what we believe to be our draft recommendation to the community. So,
Right.
and then get feedback on that draft recommendation.
Correct.
Reserve the right to change our mind.
So our draft recommendations are our definition of the large project, and that we need a process for prioritizing and sequencing. We're going to have project evaluation criteria. We're going to have a template, but I thought I heard Elise say something that we decided a few weeks ago, which we haven't decided yet between option 2 and 3. Or have we?
No, but I think that we do have a recommendation that the town and school projects be integrated.
Yes, it's just the next part, present at a joint meeting. Is that the?
So that, yeah,
I
that
think
could be,
that's unnecessary on this slide.
right. Right.
So I'm going to add the language here of priorities, project timing, and debt sequencing.
Yeah.
Here, showing.
Okay.
You're really fast with this stuff, though.
No, it's painful. Oh, sorry.
So then the last bullet just seems out of order then. Like Carl was saying, first we have to identify them. It's almost like it would be the second bullet. First, we decide what's a large project, then we identify them, then we prioritize them. And the last thing is we integrate them.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
Carl, do I have that wrong?
No, I think, yeah, it's probably better. I mean, the actual sequence of these things, yes, you want to do that early on, but we're just saying, here's the recommendations. We're not, this isn't the same as the sequence, but whatever. Yeah.
Other comments on this?
It still seems kind of redundant. But maybe offline we can, there's some duplication in here, but we could probably fix it offline.
I think we're going to have to fix it offline. We also need to have a look at Parashar's slides, which we'll have to do offline as well, I think, because I would really like to take some public comment.
So I think I think I could probably remove this.
Yeah, I think so. That's much better.
Looks better on the page.
Much better.
So I don't see any member of the public with us. Is there anyone who'd like to make public comment? Okay. Seeing
Guess
none,
we've scared them all straight.
I guess, yeah, we talked about the same thing so many
Such
times.
a fascinating topic.
All right, should we spend a couple of minutes thinking about how we will present?
Yes.
Can I stop sharing screen?
That's fine. We had okay. November 4th. Okay, so we have the first piece of the slideshow is background and task force members. And we have the charge and work to date. And this is just straight off the agenda. We have the existing process for town and for tiers 1 and 2, and for schools, same tiers 1 and 2, and then this process for tier 3 very large projects. So the question is, do we want to differentiate between the schools process and the town's process for very large projects or not?
I have a hard time thinking we have to say something about the school committee's involvement having to be so critical. I'm not sure you can, I think you have to differentiate at least a little.
Okay,
I don't need, because we could really get into the weeds between the region and the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very complicated, honestly. And I think for the purpose of this discussion, I don't think we need to sort of belabor the differences or similarities. Obviously, both the select board and the school committee and town meeting are critical parts of the decision-making process. So
so right now, correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
the school committee and school administration take their very large projects and they discuss it with the FinCom and fit it into the guidelines. The projects fit in or they don't fit in, right? Same thing for towns. So I think that the important thing, the thing that will be different about this is an integrated process.
Yeah.
And so I think that to the extent that the current process, the status quo, does have integrated conversations going on, I think we ought to be flagging those, highlighting those. And then our recommendations for a new process would increase that integration in a more with a more structured way somehow.
I guess I would use the word codify at least instead of increase.
Okay, good, fair enough.
Because the things I think that fall outside of the town manager's plan for the Concord Public Schools and the, I would say, very, very large projects that, go through the feasibility and that kind
Right.
of. So it's the things I agree with you that sort of, and at the region, that doesn't really become part of the town manager's plan. So yeah, that would be good.
So for the projects that have an external funding source,
Mhm.
such as the school projects and the regional projects, or that may have an external funding process, have state money,
Mhm.
The process for obtaining that state money is imposed on the town.
Correct, but it
Fundamentally, right?
flows directly from the school committee to town meeting, I would say.
Right,
Mhm.
right. So I think that if we describe our tier 3 process, that kind of the option for external funds is another kind of flavor.
Well, I mean, we do have, well, that's a tricky one because you build in we have a mechanism for, or not a mechanism, but a provision for opportunistic
Mhm.
projects. But if something's a need, it's in, like, if there's a capital need, it's a need whether or not there's state funding or not. Like if a piece of infrastructure is needed to be built or is failing and needs to be replaced.
Right.
You gotta, you need it whether there's money available or not. But there are times where a grant or, you end up getting, invited to the next round of, your SOI gets moved forward by MSBA or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you have to go the opportunistic route because there is funding available. That can change the sequencing, but I
Right.
don't think tying it to funding source, that really kind of belies what is an actual need.
Well, so I'm content with making the funding source an opportunistic factor. It'd certainly be true if there were FEMA dollars available for something that we needed, or whatever. It'd be quite opportunistic in positive and negative ways.
Closer in that 10-year horizon, that's when funding sources and so on and opportunities can,
Okay.
play an important role.
Mhm. All right, good. So who would like to present the recommendations of the task force? Who would like to present the school's process and the town's process? And who would like to talk about the background task force charge work to date?
I'll do the background. Unless somebody else wants to.
That's good to me.
Maybe I won't get stuck with anything, but Cynthia, would there be something else that you might want to do? Because having kind of followed this thing for a few years, I don't know.
Sure, just give me an assignment, but not the, I think Jared should probably present the school process.
Elise, how many assignments do you have there? 4?
We
Or
can have
another-
we can have as many as we can want. We can have a speaking part for everybody, or we can have a speaking part for one person,
It's a
Whatever.
middle school play. No.
I mean, we talked about it as being and kind of a team effort, and that would
Yeah.
be why we would also, why we would rotate the presentation.
Sure.
But
Right.
because it's a Zoom, it's kind of odd too. Yeah. So we need somebody to kind of be able to record the comments that we get, even though obviously we can record the session.
The comments that we get during the session?
From the public input, right?
W-
I would write it on
Recording?
newsprint if we were meeting in person.
We
Yeah, I
agreed
do.
that the public comment will be after. We're going to go through the presentation and
Yeah.
then. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Elise, why don't you give us some draft assignments? And then if maybe some of us want to trade or something, but what do you think?
Well, I
Kinda
was gonna say,
Yankee,
I was gonna nominate Elise to present the the options
Yeah.
and the recommendations.
The
I
options.
second that.
And the recommendations, yeah.
Okay, I'll do that.
I mean,
I'll do the
obviously,
recommend.
yeah, because I think Lori or Jared is gonna present. the
Jared.
schools- But Jared's gonna present the school's process.
Laurie, no, just kidding.
Yeah, nice try.
Okay, all right.
And then Carrie and I will probably co-present the town's part of it.
Okay,
I
And-
also nominate Elise to do the very first slide, like to sort of just start the meeting. I think at least if you
okay,
start and end it, it would have a good rhythm to it.
okay. So I will do I'll do the welcome slide. Cynthia
Yeah.
will do maybe I'll do the task force members, and then Cynthia, you'll do the background, and
I think Carl wanted to do that, which is fine.
Carl, you want to do that, the background and the charge, and
Sure, I might as well do something. Yeah.
okay. And so Cynthia, what does that leave you?
Give me an assignment.
I'll take an assignment too.
Okay.
I'll help Carl or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to
Any
look at,
recommendations and so on.
yeah, okay, I'm gonna have to look at the, well, so Terry, maybe you should say something about the charge,
Okay,
since it came from the select board. How does that
Okay.
sound?
sure.
Okay,
And do we need anybody to facilitate the meeting?
yeah, well, I should probably be doing that.
So letting people in and so forth?
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
I
happy to
don't know.
do that.
Why don't you do that?
Yeah, so just make me give me,
A co-host, right?
yes.
So there's a few slides we didn't look at.
Yeah.
At the, after the recommendation, including.
Sorry, okay. Want to
Okay,
go back
next.
to them?
No, sure. It'll take 2 seconds if I just do it quickly. They're just kind of almost administrative stuff. So next steps, and then discussion. I don't know if this is just for our discussion or to help facilitate the meeting. This doesn't need to be presented. I think we can show this to kind of guide the discussion with the
Right.
forum if we think it's valuable. And then this is really just, you know.
Those
I
should
think
be
it's a
hidden.
placeholder.
Well, let's see. Yeah, okay. Oh,
I think this is the stuff from Prashar, wasn't it?
yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
And then we've got a bunch of these that we're not going to present.
We're not going to present that.
Right.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of stuff, but I think maybe Cynthia or Terry could certainly take us through what our next steps are, and then, or maybe this at least this is all of you. You start here and
The
go through these last
discussion, the discussion slide is missing one of the most important questions, which is, do you favor option 2 or 3 and why? Well, if you can go back to that discussion slide for a minute.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we want to hear from citizens on why they prefer option 1, 2, or 3?
So I'm going to take this one out because we did put the sustainable criteria in. That was after that note was made before that was done. And then maybe turn this into
Yeah,
options, feedback on options.
yeah. Feedback on options 1, 2, and 3, right?
You know, I was at did one of these Zoom meetings last week or 2 weeks ago anyway, and they had a vote thing at the end.
Right.
It would actually work very quickly too, because
Our webinar platform does allow for that.
Polling, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I actually,
see-
I've only used it one time, but
I'm
Let's-
not sure that this just seems like a complicated and abstract enough thing that 1, 2, or 3 doesn't really tell us. Like, I think it'd be better if they could actually talk and say, I like option 2 because blah, blah, blah.
oh, people can do that. Yeah, I was just saying, that this other thing, it just gives you a sense of the meeting. It's not.
Uh-huh.
beneficial.
So who has been in a Zoom meeting where there were 100 people?
well,
Speak
this is going to be a webinar, not a Zoom meeting.
Okay,
So people will have to raise their hands and be let in as a panelist. And I
Yeah.
think either Chris Carmody or Jeremy are going to manage that for us.
Okay, so they're going to facilitate. We don't have to worry about it.
Correct.
Okay, good.
But we still need somebody like Cynthia to say, okay, we have questions from Mrs. Jones, you're next.
Yeah. I think the town manager actually did that.
And Stephen, I'm curious, why are we doing a webinar? I mean, I would love to think we're going to have 500 people, but I don't think that's going to happen.
It's an easier way to facilitate discussion and input.
So the one thing I have gotten feedback on when we were doing our school committee meetings in a webinar is people do not, so the participants cannot see who else is there.
Yeah.
They
So
can
it
see
really,
the names, but they can see the names, but
Oh,
not.
they can't see
so,
the-
no, you can't see, you cannot see anybody except for the panelists.
Right.
On screen,
right.
but if you go to the participants thing, there are 2 tabs, panelists and attendees.
I almost feel
No.
like you can see that.
No,
Yeah.
Oh,
you cannot.
right.
That must be a setting because I know in the webinars I've been on, you can.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I would just like it so that people can see who else is there, because that has a more of a feeling of a meeting.
How many people are you expecting, Stephen? Because like in a select board meeting, we don't run that as a webinar, and I think we're gonna have fewer people than in a typical select board meeting.
So Terry, the thing is, if the FinCom shows up, that's 15 people. If the League of Women Voters show up, let's say 30 members of the league
This
show
would
up.
be wonderful.
Yay.
So, but fundamentally, if people come, they probably are coming because they have something to say.
Yeah,
And so my question is, are we going to do this through the chat function on Zoom? Or is it a,
I think the webinar thing is, yeah.
okay,
So,
so,
sorry.
so Jeremy is the guru of that?
It'll be either here, I think Chris is scheduled to do this one. So I think the big thing is you have to set it up in advance. And so we're setting it up, assuming we're gonna get a big crowd. If we don't, we do have the option of elevating everybody who's there. If we get 10 people, we can elevate everybody to panelist.
Great.
right.
Versus, but I think the webinar is the right way to start this.
Okay.
So can I just comment on this, because I figured my input probably will be good. So we have it set up right now as a webinar. So when you start, everyone who's not a member of the committee will be set up in like a waiting area, I guess you could call it, where you don't see who else is in the meeting, who else is a non-speaker. So we can elevate everyone, but then we just have to make sure people stay muted. And then if they have a question, what we've done in past meetings, like I was working on the White Pond meeting before, and we just had them raise their hands with the raise hand feature, and then we called on them one at a time to speak. So
Okay, and can you control the settings so that you can bring everyone in muted?
Mhm.
yeah, we just have to make sure they stay that way. But yes, we can do that.
Okay. Well, that
Yes, we-
seems good.
We had some fun with that at a meeting last week.
Every week, but but yeah, there's a particular
Great, thank you, Jeremy.
Okay, that's
Cool.
great.
I
Okay,
want
what
to
else?
thank Elise for just doing a terrific job of leading this herd of cats group here and getting us to this point. Thank you.
All I
Indeed.
do is post the meetings, but Stephen does all the typing. Really great.
All right, now
Well,
I'll stop sharing. So
I appreciate everybody's input, very helpful. So
Elise go ahead.
So I'm going to recap in email our assignments. How's that? And Stephen, will you share the PowerPoint with me so that I can kind of cluster slides and stuff? And then we will meet again on the 9th at 6:45
Sounds great.
and
I
roll
thought
right
we were
into the
meeting
pub.
Are we meeting at 3 o'clock on the 9th?
We don't have that meeting scheduled. Did we intend to?
I thought we did. Maybe we don't need it now. Maybe we're ready.
Do you think we need it?
It's gonna be too late.
No, I just thought that we did have it posted, but maybe we don't need it.
No, we have the 6:45 posted on the 9th.
Right.
And then we'll have the 7:30 event.
Good.
Okay.
Will we get to see the slides just so we kind of, can
Yeah.
Oh,
ourselves
A preview?
yeah, no, I'm
well, a
gonna,
preview just so we know
Yeah.
what's going on and,
I'm gonna try and I'm gonna clean it up a little bit and add my plan is to use the town meeting format, the standard town meeting format for presentations.
The
I know-
fancy blue slides?
The fancy blue slides. I know there's mixed.
You don't
review
like
on
the
that.
black and white version?
No, it's not nuanced enough.
I get it. Okay.
People are used to seeing that other formats. That's why it's
All right.
the easiest to do. So I will do that and redistribute. But I do want to, and not to extend the meeting any further. I apologize. I'm terrible at this. But did we want to vote on this on the draft recommendations? I mean,
Why not?
we talked them through. but we didn't really formalize, and I will share my screen again.
Oh, good.
We didn't really memorialize that this is what we are going to present as a draft recommendation to the public. And do we need to, or is consensus good enough for now?
So Stephen has made a motion that these will be the draft recommendations presented at the public meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Terry has seconded it. All in favor?
Well, I think we should do a roll call, at least.
All right, we'll do a roll call.
I'm a little confused about what I'm voting on.
Do you agree to show these as a task force recommendation at the public forum? That's the question.
As a draft task force.
As a
recommendation.
draft task force recommendation.
But we're not recommending one committee versus a approach. or what?
No.
Okay.
No, this is just stuff we think needs to happen, and we have, and there are two options to accomplish this.
Cynthia,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes, Steve may want to just kind of clean it up a little bit or
okay, so
yeah.
fair enough to make edits and formatting changes without substantively changing the recommendation?
Mhm.
Okay, Terry,
Yes.
Jared,
Yes.
Laurie,
Yes,
Carrie,
Yes,
Stephen,
Yes.
Elise, yes. Did I get everybody? Yes, okay. Great.
Sorry.
No, thank
No,
you
that's
for keeping me on track. Okay, so we'll go around for parting shots before we adjourn. Carrie, anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you. I've talked plenty.
Cynthia,
I'm all set.
Carrie,
no,
Laurie,
no, thank you.
Jared,
I'm good. Thank you.
Carl,
I'm all talked out.
Stephen,
Likewise.
thank you all.
Thanks. Good
Thank
meeting.
you.
So
Good
we'll
meeting.
adjourn the meeting and see you next week.
And we'll
Yeah.
look for your correspondence.
Hey, Lori,
Yes.
can I give you a quick call?
Sure.
Thanks. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
So long, everybody. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.